So up to now, we've been talking about just all the negativity of how humans have an impact on our society, and it is true that currently the way that we're living our life is not sustainable. So um, let's first kind of talk about why it's not sustainable, and then let's look at like maybe different ways that um, you and I, as well as our society in general, can become a little more sustainable. So um, to be sustainable, we want to be able to provide the goods and services not only for our current generation, but for future generation, right? And a big part of that is making sure that we also preserve the biodiversity that currently exists um, on our biosphere. So the way that we're currently living is not sustainable. So some of the goals that we want to try to approach with regards to trying to be sustainable is to try to figure out a way to reduce the amount of energy and material being land, water, right? How do we reduce our use of material? Because the more that we can reduce this energy and material use, the less waste that we can actually end up accumulating, right? And so if we produce also less material, we can produce less product, which again will lead to less waste. And so that's kind of our goal. And um, the reason why the life right now is not sustainable is because we currently use a lot of our resources. So, example with land, you saw that we use a lot of our land for not only homes, but we also use it for our factories, our roads, our city, our agriculture. And agriculture is a really big waste producer, as we mentioned in the last lecture, right? Agriculture requires a lot of land, and so oftentimes we'll end up cutting down forests, or we end up using a land that the way that we currently um, do agriculture in the United States, a lot of that land becomes desert, so desertification, because of the method that we apply. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. So in addition to the amount of land that agriculture uses, they also use a lot of non-renewable um, energy, right? They use a lot of fossil fuel. Additionally, they lead to a lot of pollutants because the use of fertilizer, the use of pesticides, produces a lot of pollution. Agriculture also uses a lot of water. And then a lot of the fresh water that we use in the United States not only goes to agriculture, that's a big part of it, but it also goes to, like we mentioned, how we use it on a day-to-day basis, right? So a lot of the water we waste not from cooking and drinking, but from like bathing, from watering our lawn. So what can we do to try and make our life a little bit more sustainable? So let's look at that. So I'm going to kind of touch upon two different types of ways that we can think about sustainability. The first one is rural sustainability, and the second one is urban sustainability. So we in the South Bay live in an area where we're going to look more at urban sustainability. But let's just kind of visit rural sustainability. So what can agriculture do to make it so that it's more sustainable, right? Because most of the rural land is consists of agriculture and farmland. And so one method is to do what I already highlighted down here, the polyculture farming. Polyculture farming just means that we grow multiple different plants together in an area, and these plants oftentimes will have beneficial factors for both of them. So we can do what's called complement planting, where we found plants that actually are complement to each other and can kind of mimic the natural ecosystem. So meaning that one plant can deter pests that would normally tackle another plant. So for example, if you're growing in your own backyard tomatoes, maybe you want to grow some marigold with it, because marigold kind of help reduce the pests that like to eat tomatoes. And so that would be an example of a polyculture farming, like planting different crops together. Additionally, by planting different crops together, especially if you plant native plants, so picking plants that natively know how to reside in this certain region is better. But by growing multiple different plants, you're actually introducing a lot of different nutrients, right? Because the plant contains a lot of like mineral nutrients. So that actually helps with regards to the soil and enriching that topsoil so that we reduce the chance of that land, that farmland becoming desert. So that's what we're trying to do when we do sustainability, is what can we do to prevent further damage to that land to the point where it might lead to desertification. So using native species, doing polyculture farming, right? Um, Rotating. So as we mentioned previously, by growing the crops in straight rows the way that we do, it leads a lot of times to the topsoil being lost. So if we grow it in a way that kind of makes it so that we're growing multiple different plants in those rows so that we can add nutrients, and that we're growing native plants, and that we are replenishing the topsoil, we're less likely to have that topsoil be depleted, leading to desertification. Additionally, agriculture uses a lot of fossil fuel, right? So maybe there's a way for us to try to use other renewable energy source instead of fossil fuel. On our right-hand side, we can look at urban sustainability. So that's something that's going to be more related to us living in the South Bay, right? Because we obviously live in a very urban area versus a very rural area. So there's different methods that you and I can take to try to just be a little more sustainable. One would be like, to use energy efficient transportation, right? So whether that be like a electric or a hybrid car, or taking the bus system, which I know right now is kind of hard to, since the BTA is on strike, but you see what I'm getting at, right? Additionally, a lot of times in a lot of urban area, we don't really see too much in the South Bay, but if you go to other cities, including like San Francisco, New York, you'll often see these green roof. I think there is an exhibit in the California Academy of Science where they'll show you an example of a green roof where you grow a lot of plants, you have a lot of park area, so that it serves a purpose of providing greenery, also providing a space for people to enjoy, while at the same time having a dual usage of like maybe commercial space or homes underneath it. So that's another way that we can kind of just try to reduce our land use a little bit by having these green roof. Um, Additionally, a lot of the pollution that's produced in urban area is called noise pollution. So this can affect like other animals that live in that area. Uh, this can actually be considered a pollution for them. So trying to figure out different ways to do noise control can kind of help us be a little more sustainable, to be a little more friendly to our our neighbors that live with us, all those little animals, the little birds and stuff, trying to help them out, right, with our noise control. Similarly to the rural sustainability, one way that we can be more sustainable is if you do grow plants in your yard to make it so that it uses a little bit less water, right? So picking ones that are a little bit less water, use a little bit less water, especially in California where we're constantly getting hit with like droughts. And additionally, planting native species, because oftentimes when you plant species that aren't native, they are not quite as adapted to living in our weather. So they might require more water, for example, usage. So they might be more susceptible to like certain pests. So planting some native plants is always a good idea in our parks or even in just your backyard, and trying to just kind of reduce our usage, recycle our usage. So one of the ways that we can recycle is like trying to come up with the better ways to collect our stormwater. So stormwater management is another one where we can kind of control our stormwater. We can then recycle that water and reuse it for, like, for example, for watering the plants in parks or like in our yard. So these are just like different tasks, and it's kind of hard to hit them all at once. But if you want to be able to live on the earth right now and try to reduce kind of like your footprint and make it so that it's more sustainable for future generation, these are just some of the small steps that you can take to kind of help out our biosphere as well as increase our biodiversity. All right, thanks you guys.